Couples who've been married for decades commonly say that forgiveness is the secret to a great marriage. But what is forgiveness and how do you do it, especially when your spouse repeatedly hurts you? Join me for today's episode and we'll talk about it. All humans have a shadow, or what I call a villain, and all humans have a light side of themselves and what I call a hero. One moment we're loving, kind, and generous, and the next we can be cruel, unkind, and selfish. This is the reality of being human, and marriage is made up of two people who are both villain and hero. Your villain is going to hurt each other, consciously and subconsciously. Your villain largely exists in your survival system. Your ego wants to look good, feel good, be right, and be in control. It wants to see your spouse as a threat, as a bad guy or a bad gal or the enemy. And when it does see your spouse that way, all of a sudden you give yourself permission to attack, to wound, to belittle, to scorn, to control, to criticize, to emotionally abandon. Our survival system tells us that we will be safe behind a wall of self-protection where no one can hurt us. The problem is that we're human, and behind that wall that we build to keep everyone out is us, and our villain will destroy us. One of the big ways that our villain tries to destroy us is through unforgiveness. When we hold on to unforgiveness, it's like holding on to poison inside of us. Our physical bodies don't function well with unforgiveness. Johns Hopkins research shows that unforgiveness causes a person to be in a chronic state of anger, which puts them into fight or flight mode, resulting in increased heart rate, blood pressure, and immune response, which increases the risk of depression, heart disease, diabetes, anxiety, depression, and all over pain in the body as our body literally starts attacking itself due to this poison that we're carrying around of hatred and anger towards others. And what Johns Hopkins research also found is that when people choose to forgive, they experience the opposite of all these things. People are literally being healed from life-threatening diseases when they choose to forgive. Holding on to unforgiveness is like drinking poison and hoping that it affects the other person. When your spouse hurts you, you have a choice. You can work through the offense and forgive, or hold on to the offense and stay in unforgiveness. Unforgiveness produces bitterness, resentment, contempt, disconnection, and increased defensive reactions. Forgiveness, on the other hand, produces wisdom, awareness, healing, clarity of what boundaries need to be set and when they're being broken. And most of all, it creates connection. It's completely up to you. You get to decide. Unforgiveness divides you and your spouse. Forgiveness connects the two of you. Forgiveness is the road less traveled. It takes humility, personal responsibility, and commitment. You don't just walk through the steps and voila, forgiveness occurs. No, forgiveness is a moment-by-moment choice. Forgiveness is a posture of the heart. It is a way of life. It is a choice to have a heart of forgiveness, meaning when you notice you are in unforgiveness, you choose to forgive. Even if you've already think that you've forgiven for that in the past, or you're needing to forgive it again because your spouse did the same thing again. You are committed to learn to forgive. And for me, I committed to learn to forgive when I learned about my husband's infidelity. I was so devastated, and I didn't know if I wanted to be married anymore. But what I did know beyond a shadow of a doubt is no matter what, I knew I wanted to forgive, because I had just walked through a journey of starting to learn how to forgive, and it was setting my heart free. I was experiencing more joy and more life in my heart and soul than I had experienced in a long time. And I knew that I stood at a crossroads, and the most hurtful thing that I'd ever walked through, I could choose to stay in unforgiveness or I could choose to forgive. And I knew no matter what, I wanted to learn how to forgive. I asked God to teach me how to forgive something that felt so devastating. And He taught me. And after I experienced the miracle of forgiveness that I walked through as God helped me walk one step at a time, I heard a lesson from a pastor called named Bob Hamp, teach about forgiveness. And as he walked through the teaching, he taught the exact steps that I had taken and I still take today to forgive the various different things, the various different offenses that happen in my life from my husband or other people in my life. So that's what I want to share with you today. And as I share this, my experience with you, my experience has taught me that forgiveness is far bigger than me. It's far bigger than any human. And for me, I needed a higher power to help me to do that. And I think that that's true for most, but you get to decide what's true for you. I invite you to be here with me and try it on and see what works for you. For me, God has been a significant part of learning to forgive and learning to become a person who walks in forgiveness. My experience with forgiveness has taught me that there's my part and there's God's part. And I can't do His part and He can't do my part. And until I do my part, His part can't happen. So my part includes the choice to forgive, the ownership of what specifically I am forgiving. We're going to talk more about that because, it's easy to say, well, I just forgive my husband for, being mean to me, but that doesn't actually produce forgiveness. I need to get very specific about the specific time that he was mean to me. And there may be 20 times that come to mind. I need to walk through forgiveness for each one of those. And then the third part of me choosing to forgive is confessing my judgment, because forgiveness and judgment, or unforgiveness and judgment, go hand in hand. When I get offended, my survival system immediately drives me to judge. And so whenever I've walked in unforgiveness or been offended by something my husband has done, I know that I also have judgments towards him. And when I do my three parts, my choice to forgive, my willingness to get very specific about what I am forgiving, and I confess my judgments, I have done my part. And now God can do His part, which is the miracle of forgiveness, where the hurt and the pain are healed. And they don't always happen simultaneously. It's not like a magic trick where I do my parts and then boom, the miracle of being healed happens. No, sometimes I need to walk through my parts multiple times before I actually experience the miracle, because I didn't actually fully give myself to my part. And once I do, then it's powerful to experience that miracle. And I've experienced it in significant ways. Here is how the prayer goes. So it starts out, God, I choose to forgive. And then you put the person's name in there. In this situation, we're talking about our spouse. So you would put your spouse's name. And then you say, for the specific offense that occurred. So let's say you were out with friends and that something he did or she did was like they belittled you and they embarrassed you and they, shamed you. That's 3 separate offenses that you need to walk through this separately for each one of those. And then you move to the next part where you get even more specific when it says what he or she did caused me to feel. And then you write out exactly what it is that you felt. I felt embarrassed. I felt unimportant. I felt unloved. I felt insecure. I felt, angry. Whatever it is that you felt in those moments, this is a very important part of releasing or working through letting go of the actual offense. And then it moves to the next part where it says, please take these things from me and place them on the cross. Now we move into the third part where it says, God, have I judged this person? And if you look close enough, you'll probably see that, yes, you have judged them. And so then you move into, I have judged him or her, and you write the very specific judgments you have made about them. So in this situation, that I was just describing, maybe it's, I judged him as mean and unloving and unkind and a jerk. Whatever it is that are the judgments you came up with, you write them down specifically. And then it moves into, and I hardened my heart against him or her and limited him or her to this is all they are and all they ever will be. God, please forgive me for judging you put in the person's name. I release those judgments and choose to see them through your eyes. Now, I've been walking through these steps using this prayer for 12 years, and I have found it to work like nothing else I've ever done because it allows me to do all the parts that are needed in order to actually forgive. Now, if you recognize that you need to forgive your spouse, I invite you to try it on and see what happens. Forgiveness doesn't mean you become a doormat and that your spouse gets to keep hurting you in the same way over and over and you just keep getting to forgive. No, this is called being a martyr and enabling your spouse to grow narcissism in themselves. Forgiveness gives clarity for you to see what boundaries or requests you need to set to create a new future together. For example, infidelity. When I needed to forgive my husband for infidelity, I let him know that I would forgive him. And at the same time, I wasn't willing to be in a marriage where infidelity continued. We both worked really hard to get brutally honest about what we had contributed to our marriage to let it get to the point where that level of betrayal occurred. We set up clear boundaries and check-in points for the conversations we would need to have to rebuild the trust and live in authentic trust moving forward. With day-to-day things like recently he said something about me that felt belittling, and I used this forgiveness prayer to forgive him, and then we discussed it. And he realized that he was holding on to an offense towards me, which is what brought him to belittle me. He asked me to forgive him, and I said yes, I would, and let him know that I already had. We talked through it, and I asked that in the future, he talk to me about it, about an offense right away when he was offended, and he agreed that he would do that moving forward. This is the process I use to forgive offenses or hurt when my husband and anyone who I'm offended by. This is the important work of forgiveness, and it will set you free and allow you to begin to attract people to you and attract situations to you where people respect and treat you in a way that is life-giving because you're creating an internal experience for yourself of being life-giving because you're not holding on to the decay and the disease that bitterness puts inside you. When you hold on to unforgiveness, you actually attract people to you to hurt you. When you forgive, you attract people to you that want to be loving and kind and walk in a life of forgiveness as well. If you found this helpful, would you let me know that by sharing one thing that you found helpful about this conversation in the comments below? And make sure you click that subscribe button right underneath this video so you don't miss an episode. If you want to learn more about how I turn defensiveness into connection in my marriage, you will find a link to my free ebook in the description under this video. Thank you for joining me. I look forward to connecting with you again soon.